You think deep fried soul food was just fried chicken and catfish? Think again. African American kitchens across the South turned cast iron skillets into bubbling cauldrons of crispy, golden innovation that fed families through generations. Let's dig into 30 forgotten deep fried soul foods no one makes anymore. Fried chicken livers were treasured delicacies in African American kitchens during the 1960s and 70s, prized for their rich flavor and economical value. Cooks would rinse the livers, pat them dry, then dredge them in seasoned flour with paprika and cayenne before lowering them into hot oil. The exterior turned golden and crispy, while the inside stayed creamy, creating contrast that made every bite memorable. Families served them at gatherings and packed them for workers heading to factories. The livers were affordable because butchers sold them cheaply or included them free with whole chickens. Served with hot sauce and white bread, fried chicken livers represented thrift and resourcefulness that defined soul food cooking. Fried fish roe was a springtime tradition that brought excitement to African American tables when rivers ran full and fish were spawning. The roe sacks were carefully extracted, rinsed gently, and seasoned with salt and pepper before being dredged in cornmeal and lowered into sizzling lard. The coating turned crispy while the roe inside became firm yet slightly creamy, offering briny richness unlike anything else. Families near rivers considered this a seasonal treasure available only during spawning months. Children learned to appreciate its unique texture, watching elders prepare it with reverence passed through generations. Fried fish roe was often served alongside grits and eggs for breakfast, turning morning meals into something special. Fried okra fritters were clever ways to transform garden abundance into something crispy and irresistible during summer months. Cooks would slice fresh okra, mix it with cornmeal batter seasoned with onion and spices, then drop spoonfuls into hot oil until they puffed golden brown. The fritters emerged with crunchy exteriors, giving way to tender okra inside, the vegetable's natural slickness mellowed by frying. Families made these when gardens overflowed with okra, needing use before growing too tough. Church suppers featured platters passed around while still warm and fragrant. The dish was economical since okra grew easily in southern soil. Children who claimed to dislike okra devoured these fritters, proving preparation mattered as much as ingredients. Fried pork chop sandwiches were working-class treasures that fueled laborers through long days in factories and fields. Thin-cut pork chops were pounded flat, seasoned with salt, pepper, and garlic, then dredged in flour and fried until edges turned crispy while meat stayed juicy. Slapped between soft white bread with mustard and pickles, these sandwiches traveled well and satisfied hunger like few other meals. Families made them early mornings, wrapping them in wax paper for husbands heading to work before dawn. The pork chops were affordable cuts that stretched when fried thin and served between bread. Children received smaller versions as treats, learning good food required no expensive ingredients. These sandwiches represented honest labor and care families put into keeping workers fed. Fried sweet potato pies were portable treasures that turned holiday flavors into handheld treats perfect for church socials. Cooks prepared spiced sweet potato filling, tucked it inside rounds of homemade dough, then sealed the edges before lowering them into hot oil. The crust fried golden and flaky while filling stayed warm and creamy, creating packages of comfort eaten without plates or forks. These hand pies appeared at revivals, picnics, and homecomings where food needed to travel well. The filling used beloved spices, including cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla that perfumed the air. Children loved these because they could eat while playing without returning to the table. Fried sweet potato pies was celebration food made practical, bringing holiday warmth to everyday occasions. Fried chicken gizzards with gravy was Sunday dinner traditions, showcasing the soul food commitment to using every part of the bird. The gizzards were cleaned thoroughly, boiled until tender, then dredged in seasoned flour and fried until the coating turned deeply golden and crisp. Rich gravy was made from pan drippings, poured over rice or potatoes to soak up every drop. The texture was unique, chewy, but not tough, with concentrated poultry flavor the rest of the chicken could not match. Families stretched one bird into multiple meals by frying gizzards separately as their own dish. Elders often claimed gizzards for themselves, considering them a reward for preparing Sunday dinner. Served with hot sauce, fried gizzards represented economy and appreciation for ingredients others discarded. Fried cornmeal mush was breakfast magic that transformed yesterday's leftovers into something crispy and golden for the morning table. Families poured leftover mush into pans, let it set overnight until firm, then sliced it thick and fried each piece in bacon grease until the exterior turned crunchy, while inside stayed soft and creamy. The edges caramelized, adding sweetness that complemented drizzles of molasses or sorghum syrup. This dish wasted nothing, turning what might be discarded into hearty breakfast that filled bellies before school or work. Children loved the contrast between shatteringly crisp crust and smooth interior, eating slice after slice. The smell of frying cornmeal filled kitchens with warmth on cold mornings. Fried cornmeal mush was thrift-made delicious. Fried salt pork strips were flavor bombs that brought richness to simple meals when money was tight and options were few. The salt pork was sliced thin, soaked briefly to remove excess salt, then fried slowly until fat rendered out and edges turned crispy like thick-cut bacon. What remained was intensely savory, chewy in the middle with shattering crisp edges, adding texture to plates of beans, greens, or eggs. Families relied on salt pork because it kept without refrigeration, stored in crocks for months. The rendered fat was saved for cooking everything from biscuits to vegetables, stretching resources further. Workers packed fried salt pork in lunches, eating them cold on bread at job sites. This was survival food that tasted better than necessity demanded. Fried rabbit pieces were country cooking at its finest, turning wild game or backyard hutch rabbits into crispy, tender meals rivaling any fried chicken. The rabbit was jointed, soaked in buttermilk to tenderize the lean meat, then dredged in seasoned flour and fried until golden brown with a crust that crackled with every bite. The meat inside stayed moist and mild, taking on seasoning flavors while maintaining delicate texture, distinguishing it from poultry. Rural families raised rabbits for frying because they reproduced quickly and required little space or feed. Children learned to help with preparation, understanding where food came from and respecting animals that sustained them. Fried rabbit was often served at special gatherings, considered more refined than everyday fare. It represented self-sufficiency. Fried apple fritters were sweet indulgences that turned seasonal fruit into golden rings of comfort during autumn harvest months. Cooks sliced apples into rounds, dipped them in sweetened batter spiced with cinnamon and nutmeg, then fried until coating puffed and turned deep golden while fruit inside softened. The fritters were dusted with powdered sugar while warm, creating a snowy coating that melted against the hot surface. Families made these when apple trees produced more fruit than could be eaten fresh, turning abundance into celebration. Children gathered around skillets waiting for the first batch, burning fingers in eagerness. Church bake sales featured platters wrapped in wax paper, sold for pennies supporting community causes. Fried apple fritters were autumn in every bite. Fried fatback cracklings were crispy treasures rendered from pure pork fat that became snacks, seasonings, and survival food all in one. The fatback was cut into cubes and fried slowly until fat melted away and what remained turned into golden, crunchy morsels that shattered between teeth. The cracklings carried intense pork flavor, eaten straight from the pan or crumbled into cornbread for texture. Families made these during hog killing season when every part of the pig was processed for months ahead. Children gathered around waiting for the first batch, burning tongues on pieces still glistening with hot grease. The rendered lard was saved for cooking. Throughout the year, fried fatback cracklings represented the complete use of resources that defined soul food traditions. Fried hog maws were testament to the soul food philosophy that nothing from the pig should go to waste. The pig's stomach was cleaned meticulously, boiled until tender, then sliced into strips and fried until edges turned crispy while the center stayed chewy. The flavor was mild and porky, taking on whatever seasonings the cook chose to add. Families who grew up eating hog maws considered them comfort food, while those unfamiliar often needed convincing. The dish appeared at holiday tables and community gatherings where traditional foods were celebrated. Elders passed down preparation techniques, teaching younger generations the patience required to clean and cook them properly. Fried hog maws carried cultural significance beyond their flavor. Fried porgies were coastal treasures that brought the taste of the Atlantic to African American tables throughout the Southeast. These small, bony fish were cleaned whole, scored along the sides, seasoned generously, then dredged in cornmeal and fried until skin turned crispy while flesh stayed moist and sweet. Eating them required skill, picking around tiny bones, but those who grew up with porgies considered the effort worthwhile. Families near the coast caught them fresh, while inland communities bought from vendors traveling through neighborhoods. Fried porgies were Friday night suppers, fish fry centerpieces, and weeknight meals when budgets were tight. The entire fish was edible for those willing to crunch through crispy fins and tails. Fried corn fritters were summer celebrations that captured the sweetness of fresh-picked corn in crispy golden packages. Cooks scraped kernels from cobs, mixed them with flour, eggs, and seasonings, then dropped spoonfuls into hot oil where they puffed and browned. The fritters were sweet and savory, tender inside with crispy edges, providing textural contrast. Families made these when corn season peaked and ears were so abundant that new uses became necessary. Church picnics featured platters served warm with butter or honey drizzled on top. Children loved them because they tasted almost like dessert while being acceptable as a side dish. Fried corn fritters was summer preserved in every bite, a taste that lingered in memory long after harvest ended. Fried peach ham pies were summer treasures that turned ripe fruit into portable packages of golden flaky comfort. Fresh peaches were peeled, sliced, and cooked down with sugar and spices until they became thick, filling, tucked inside rounds of homemade dough. The pies were sealed carefully, then lowered into hot oil where crust fried crispy while filling bubbled inside. Families made these during peach season when trees produced more fruit than could be eaten fresh. The pies traveled well to church gatherings and work sites where handheld treats provided midday comfort. Children often helped with crimping edges, learning kitchen skills through participation. Glazed with sugar while warm, fried peach ham pies carried Southern summers in every bite. Fried chitterlings were the bold expressions of soul food tradition, transforming pig intestines into something crispy and surprisingly delicious. After hours of cleaning and boiling, the chitterlings were cut into pieces, seasoned, dredged in flour, and fried until the exterior turned golden and crunchy. The texture inside was tender and chewy, carrying a distinctive flavor that divided opinions sharply. Families who served fried chitterlings did so with pride. Understanding this dish connected them to ancestors who transformed scraps into sustenance. Holiday gatherings featured chitterlings alongside familiar dishes, offering tradition for those who remembered and curiosity for younger generations. The cooking process filled homes with an unmistakable aroma announcing celebration. Fried croaker fish were beloved staples at fish fries throughout African American communities along rivers and coastlines. Named for the sound they made when caught, these fish were cleaned, scored, seasoned, then dredged in cornmeal before hitting hot oil. The skin fried into a crackling crust while white flesh inside stayed flaky and moist, falling easily from the bone. Families gathered at community fish fries where croakers sizzled in large outdoor fryers, the smell drawing neighbors from blocks away. The fish were served on newspaper with hot sauce, white bread, and coleslaw. Children learned to eat around bones carefully, developing skills that served them at many future fish fries. Fried croaker represented community gathering and celebration. Fried green tomatoes were clever solutions when frost threatened gardens before everything could ripen. The firm, tart tomatoes were sliced thick, dipped in buttermilk, dredged in cornmeal, then fried until coating turned golden and crisp. The tomato inside softened slightly while retaining its tangy bite, creating flavor unlike anything ripe tomatoes offered. Families served them as side dishes, appetizers, or layered in sandwiches where their tartness cut through richer flavors. The dish appeared at Sunday dinners and weeknight suppers alike, equally at home on formal tables and kitchen counters. Children who grew up eating fried green tomatoes often preferred them to ripe versions, craving that crispy coating and tangy center. This was resourcefulness transformed into tradition. Fried pig ears were crunchy delicacies, showcasing the soul food commitment to using every part of the hog. The ears were cleaned, boiled until tender, then sliced into strips and fried until impossibly crispy, shattering with each bite. The texture was unique, mostly cartilage that became crackling and light when properly fried, carrying mild pork flavor enhanced by seasonings. Families served them as snacks or bar food, often with hot sauce and vinegar on the side. The ears were affordable because butchers sold them cheaply, making them accessible during lean times. Children either loved or avoided them based on texture preferences, but those who acquired the taste craved them into adulthood. Fried pig ears proved resourcefulness and deliciousness could coexist. Fried hush puppies were essential companions to every fish fry, golden cornmeal balls emerging from the same oil as the fish they accompanied. The batter was simple, combining cornmeal, flour, egg, buttermilk, and finely chopped onion, then dropped by spoonfuls into hot oil where they puffed and browned into irregular spheres. The exterior turned crispy while the interior stayed soft and slightly sweet, the onion adding subtle depth that distinguished them from plain cornbread. Legend said they got their name from cooks tossing them to barking dogs with the command to hush, though families cared more about eating them than debating origins. Hush puppies were served hot, piled on platters alongside fried fish, passed around until they disappeared. They were never fancy, but they were always essential. Fried whitings were affordable fish that became Friday night staples in African American households across the South and urban North alike. These small, silvery fish were cleaned whole, seasoned with salt and pepper, dredged in cornmeal, and fried until the thin skin turned shatteringly crisp. The flesh was mild and sweet, flaking easily from delicate bones that required careful eating. Whitings were cheaper than most fish, making them accessible for families stretching weekly budgets. Fish markets sold them by the pound, and vendors drove through neighborhoods announcing their arrival. The smell of frying whitings signaled weekend had arrived, drawing family members to the kitchen. Served with hot sauce, white bread, and coleslaw, fried whitings were celebration food that cost little but delivered satisfaction. Fried pork rinds were crunchy snacks made from pig skin that puffed into airy, salty bites when dropped into hot oil. The skin was first boiled to remove fat, dried thoroughly, then fried at high temperature where it expanded dramatically into light, crispy curls. The flavor was intensely porky and salty, satisfying cravings for crunch without the heaviness of other fried foods. Families made these during hog killing season, wasting nothing from the animal that sustained them through winter. The rinds kept well in jars, providing snacks for weeks after preparation. Children loved them for their satisfying crunch, while adults appreciated them with cold drinks and conversation. Fried pork rinds represented resourcefulness, turning what might be discarded into something beloved and delicious. Fried frog legs were delicacies that appeared on African American tables in communities near swamps, rivers, and bayous throughout the South. The legs were cleaned, soaked in buttermilk, seasoned, dredged in flour, and fried until the coating turned golden, while the tender meat inside stayed moist and mild. The flavor was delicate, often compared to chicken, but lighter, with a sweetness unique to fresh-caught frogs. Families who lived near water caught frogs at night using flashlights and quick hands, turning evening hunts into adventures that ended with morning feasts. The legs were considered special occasion food, served at gatherings where their presence signaled abundance. Children who grew up eating frog legs developed appreciation for flavors others might never experience. Fried Spam slices were resourceful meals that turned canned meat into something crispy and satisfying when fresh options were limited. The Spam was sliced thick, then fried in a hot skillet until the exterior caramelized and developed crispy edges while the center stayed tender. The flavor was salty and slightly sweet from caramelization, transformed from canned softness into something with appealing texture. Families kept Spam in pantries because it required no refrigeration and lasted indefinitely. The fried slices were served with eggs for breakfast, tucked into sandwiches for lunch, or eaten alongside rice for dinner. Children often preferred fried Spam to fresh pork because of its familiar flavor. This was practical food that sustained communities through uncertain times. Fried chicken wings were pieces left after drumsticks, and thighs claimed center stage, transformed into crispy treasures through careful seasoning and hot oil. The wings were separated at joints, seasoned with salt, pepper, garlic, and paprika, dredged in flour, then fried until skin turned impossibly crispy while meat stayed juicy. The flavor was concentrated poultry richness, the skin providing satisfying crunch with every bite. Families who bought whole chickens saved wings for weeknight meals, stretching one bird across multiple days. Children loved wings because they were perfect handheld sizes, eaten standing up or packed in lunch bags. The bones were sucked clean, every bit of flavor extracted before discarding. Fried wings were practical, delicious, and represented nothing wasted. Fried blackberry ham pies were summer treasures that transformed forage berries into portable packages of sweet, flaky comfort. Wild blackberries were gathered from roadsides and fence lines, cooked with sugar until thick, then tucked inside rounds of dough and sealed. The pies were lowered into hot oil where crust fried crispy while filling bubbled inside, berry juice occasionally bursting through in purple streams. Families made these when bushes hung heavy with ripe berries that stained fingers during picking. The pies traveled well to church gatherings where they disappeared quickly from serving plates. Children helped with picking, earning their share through scratched arms and purple-stained hands. Fried blackberry pies captured summer in every bite. Fried chicken feet were testament to the soul food commitment that nothing from the bird should ever go to waste. The feet were cleaned meticulously, boiled until tender, then seasoned and fried until skin turned crispy while the interior stayed gelatinous. The texture was unique, combining crunch with silkiness, requiring adventurous eaters willing to gnaw around small bones. Families who raised chickens saved the feet specifically for frying, understanding their value when others might discard them. The collagen-rich feet were considered nourishing, good for joints according to kitchen wisdom passed through generations. Children who grew up eating chicken feet developed appreciation for textures others found challenging. Fried chicken feet carried cultural pride and connection to ancestors. Fried liver and onions was weeknight supper that delivered iron-rich nutrition wrapped in crispy coating and sweet caramelized onions. The liver was sliced thin, soaked in milk to mellow its mineral flavor, then seasoned, dredged in flour, and fried quickly until just cooked through. Onions were fried separately until golden and sweet, piled on top in fragrant heaps. The combination balanced liver's richness with onion sweetness, creating a dish that converted skeptics into believers. Families served this when budgets were tight, knowing liver provided essential nutrition at minimal cost. Children often resisted until that first properly prepared bite changed minds. The dish appeared with rice or potatoes, onions creating natural gravy. Fried liver proved humble ingredients could deliver satisfaction. Fried peanuts were crunchy snacks that transformed raw legumes into salty golden treats, perfect for gatherings and quiet evenings. Raw peanuts were dropped into hot oil and fried until they turned deep golden and developed satisfying crunch throughout. The flavor was nuttier and richer than roasted versions, with slight sweetness from caramelization that made them irresistible. Families in peanut-growing regions made these during harvest when fresh nuts were abundant. The fried peanuts were salted while hot, crystals clinging to the oily surface. Children gathered around waiting for them to cool, burning fingertips in eagerness. Fried peanuts were simple pleasures that brought people together, shared from bowls while stories were told and memories made. Fried sweet potato rounds were simple treats that turned humble roots into crispy, caramelized coins of sweetness. Sweet potatoes were peeled and sliced into thick rounds, dredged lightly in flour mixed with cinnamon and sugar, then fried until edges caramelized and centers softened. The natural sugars intensified with heat, creating candy-like sweetness balanced by slight bitterness of browned edges. Families made these when sweet potato harvest filled root cellars with more than could be baked or mashed. The rounds were served as side dishes, snacks, or simple desserts when resources were limited. Children especially loved them, eating them like cookies while adults appreciated their practicality. Fried sweet potato rounds proved simple preparations create memorable flavors. Flour dredging methods in 1960s soul food kitchens went far beyond simple coating techniques. Cooks understood that the odd way flour adhered to meat determined the entire texture of the finished crust. The process began with patting proteins completely dry, as any moisture created steam pockets, preventing adhesion. Flour was seasoned heavily with salt, pepper, and paprika, then spread across shallow pans, allowing pieces to turn without crowding. The dredging motion was deliberate, pressing flour firmly into every crevice before shaking off excess with controlled wrist flicks. Many cooks double dredged, returning pieces to flour after brief rests to build thicker crusts. Some families kept dedicated dredging flour that accumulated seasoning over multiple uses. These methods produced crusts that shattered while clinging to moist meat beneath.
Ham biscuits made with country ham and soft dinner rolls became handheld sandwiches that children devoured, the salty ham contrasting perfectly with the sweet, buttery rolls that held everything together. Mothers would slice country ham paper thin, the intensely salty, cured meat packed with flavor that needed only small amounts to satisfy. Then tuck the slices into soft dinner rolls that had been split and buttered. Some families brushed the tops of the assembled biscuits with melted butter and baked them briefly to warm everything through and create slightly crispy tops. The combination of salty, savory ham with soft, slightly sweet rolls created perfect flavor balance that kept people coming back for more. In 1970s Black households, ham biscuits represented Southern tradition, appetizers that could be prepared ahead and served at room temperature. Children loved ham biscuits because they were familiar comfort food in easy-to-eat form, requiring no plates or utensils and perfect for grabbing. Buttermilk Sky biscuits were Christmas morning tradition, tall and fluffy and buttery enough to make store-bought rolls irrelevant. Black mothers made these before sunrise using self-rising flour, buttermilk, and cold butter cut into pea-sized pieces, never melted, because that destroyed flakiness. The secret was handling the dough minimally, folding it exactly 3 times to create layers without developing gluten. Some grandmothers used white lily flour specifically, swearing nothing else produced the same tenderness. The shaped biscuits were placed touching in cast iron skillets, so sides stayed soft while tops and bottoms crisped. Before baking, each was brushed with melted butter mixed with honey, not enough to make them sweet, just enough to create a golden glaze. They baked until risen to twice their height, then were brushed with more honey butter while hot. The recipe stayed secret because perfect biscuits required technique more than ingredients.
Double-dipping batters created the thick, craggy crusts that made 1960s fried chicken legendary. The technique involved coating pieces, first in seasoned flour, then dipping into beaten eggs or buttermilk, and finally returning to flour for a second coating. This layered approach built crusts of remarkable thickness that stayed crispy long after cooking. Some cooks varied the second coating, using cornmeal or crushed crackers instead of repeating flour. The resting period between dips was equally important, as rushing resulted in batters that slid off during frying. Experienced cooks let each layer set briefly before proceeding, building foundations that adhered firmly to protein beneath. The double dipping method produced distinctive ridges that held seasoning and provided textural contrast in every bite.
Sweet rice pudding with raisins was Christmas comfort at its most gentle, a dessert born from thrift and turned into grace. Leftover rice was simmered again in milk until creamy, with sugar, butter, and cinnamon stirred in to bring it to life. Plump raisins softened in the heat, releasing their sweetness into the mixture, while the scent of nutmeg or vanilla filled the air. The pudding thickened slowly, stirred by careful hands that had learned to measure not with cups, but with instinct. Served warm in simple bowls, it was dessert that asked for quiet, for gratitude, for the slow savoring of every spoonful. It tasted of simplicity, of love that didn't shout but lingered softly. For children, it was a treat. For elders, a memory. Sweet rice pudding was more than a way to use what was left. It was proof that comfort could come from the smallest acts of care. In every creamy bite lived peace, patience, and home.
Paper bag dredging was a clever method that simplified coating while minimizing mess in busy kitchens. African American cooks placed seasoned flour inside sturdy brown paper bags, added a few pieces of meat at a time, then shook vigorously until everything was evenly coated. The enclosed space created efficient tumbling that covered food more thoroughly than open pan methods. Children were often assigned shaking duties, turning a kitchen chore into playful participation that taught cooking fundamentals. The paper bags absorbed excess flour, leaving pieces with just the right amount of coating rather than heavy clumps. Some families reused bags across multiple meals, allowing them to develop concentrated seasoning that improved subsequent batches. This technique proved that brilliant cooking methods emerged from everyday problem solving.
Neckbones and potatoes simmered together became winter comfort food that warmed kitchens and filled bellies when cold weather made hunger feel even more desperate and urgent. Pork neckbones were browned first to develop flavor, then covered with water, potatoes, onions, and seasonings before simmering until meat fell from bones easily. The potatoes absorbed the porky richness, becoming creamy and flavorful while the meat turned silky and tender with hours of patient cooking. This one-pot meal required minimal attention once assembled, making it perfect for busy mothers managing multiple responsibilities throughout long days. The bones released gelatin and marrow into the broth, creating body and richness that made the dish feel more substantial than its simple ingredients suggested it would. In the 1970s, neck bones cost almost nothing per pound, and potatoes were among the cheapest vegetables available year-round in any market. Neck bones and potatoes represented making something from nothing, proving that the cheapest cuts combined with basic vegetables could create genuine comfort.
Cornmeal coating techniques brought distinctive southern crunch to fried fish, okra, and countless other dishes. African American cooks understood that cornmeal required different handling than flour, demanding specific textures to achieve its signature crispy coating. The cornmeal was often stone ground locally, with coarser textures preferred for fish, while finer grinds worked better for vegetables. Seasoning was mixed directly into cornmeal, with some cooks adding small amounts of flour to improve adhesion, while others used pure cornmeal for maximum crunch. The coating process required pressing food firmly into the meal, ensuring complete coverage that formed an unbroken shell during frying. Temperature control was critical with cornmeal, as it browned faster than flour. These techniques defined Southern fried catfish.
Asparagus, wrapped in ham, created elegant finger food that introduced children to vegetables they might not try otherwise, the salty ham making the asparagus taste less intimidating. Mothers would blanch fresh asparagus spears briefly in boiling water until they turned bright green and became slightly tender, then plunge them into ice water. Each asparagus spear was then wrapped with a thin slice of deli ham, sometimes spread with cream cheese or mustard first for extra flavor. The wrapped spears were arranged on serving platters, sometimes secured with toothpicks if the ham wouldn't stay wrapped. In Black households during the 1970s, asparagus wrapped in ham represented sophistication borrowed from magazine recipes, appetizers that looked impressive enough for special occasions. Children loved them because the ham provided familiar salty flavor, while the asparagus added crunch and color, making vegetables feel like treats rather than obligations. Ambrosia salad with fresh coconut was the Christmas side dish that straddled dessert and salad. Black mothers made this using fresh fruit, mandarin oranges, pineapple chunks, maraschino cherries, and the secret addition of pomegranate seeds that added jewel-toned color and tart brightness. The binding agent wasn't just whipped cream, but a mixture of whipped cream, sour cream, and cream cheese that gave it tanginess. Fresh coconut was grated and toasted lightly, adding nutty depth that sweetened flaked coconut couldn't match. Mini marshmallows were folded in at the last minute so they stayed soft. The salad was refrigerated for several hours, letting flavors meld while the coconut softened. It was served in crystal bowls at Christmas dinner, looking almost too pretty to eat with pink and white and red colors. The pomegranate addition and the cream cheese mixture stayed secret because these elevated ambrosia from church potluck standard to something genuinely special. Pig ear sandwiches were proof that nothing went to waste in a kitchen where every scrap had purpose. The ears were cleaned carefully, boiled for hours until tender, then fried to a golden crispness that crackled at the edges and chewed soft in the middle. Served on white bread with mustard or hot sauce, they carried a flavor deep as smoke and history itself. For many, it was the taste of home, born from necessity but remembered with pride. During Christmas gatherings, when the choicer cuts were long gone, pig ear sandwiches kept the celebration going late into the night. People gathered around the stove, swapping stories as grease popped and laughter rose. Each bite told a story of endurance, creativity, and gratitude for what the land and labor could provide. Pig ear sandwiches were not luxury food, they were legacy food, a reminder that dignity and flavor can thrive even in poverty's shadow.
Buttermilk soaking was a transformative technique that tenderized tough proteins while creating superior coating adhesion. African American cooks discovered that acid in buttermilk broke down muscle fibers in chicken and pork, producing remarkably tender results after frying. Soaking time varied by protein, with chicken often submerged overnight while smaller pieces required only a few hours. Beyond tenderizing, buttermilk created a tacky surface that grabbed flour and held it firmly throughout frying. Some families added hot sauce directly to the buttermilk bath, allowing flavors to penetrate deep into meat before cooking. The technique was especially valued for older chickens or tougher cuts needing help becoming tender. Buttermilk soaking became so essential that many cooks considered this step non-negotiable for proper soul food.
Oxtail stew transformed the tail of cattle into fall-off-the-bone tender meat swimming in rich, gelatinous gravy that coated everything perfectly when served over white rice. The oxtails were browned first to develop deep flavor, then slowly braised with onions, carrots, celery, tomatoes, and red wine or broth for hours until the meat became incredibly tender and rich. The bones released collagen and marrow, thickening the sauce naturally and creating richness that couldn't be achieved any other way with cheaper ingredients. This wasn't quick food, but patient food, requiring hours of low heat to transform tough connective tissue into silky texture worth waiting for. Families served this on special occasions despite the humble ingredient because the preparation demanded time and attention that showed love clearly. In the 1970s, oxtails were considered throwaway cuts that butchers sold cheaply, perfect for Black families who understood their potential for transformation into something special. The dish represented culinary alchemy, showing how time, technique, and patience could transform the least desirable cuts.
The smoke point test was a visual skill that separated novice cooks from masters of the fryer. Before kitchen thermometers became common, African American cooks learned to read oil temperatures through careful observation. They watched for the first wisps of smoke rising from the surface, knowing this indicated peak frying temperature. Too little heat meant soggy, grease-soaked food, while too much smoke meant burnt coatings and bitter flavors. Experienced cooks developed intuition for the exact shimmer and movement of properly heated oil, describing the moment when the surface seemed alive with tiny ripples. This knowledge passed through demonstration rather than written instruction, with mothers guiding daughters to recognize subtle visual cues. Mastering the smoke point test guaranteed perfectly golden fried foods every time.
Rumaki-wrapped chicken livers and water chestnuts in bacon created sophisticated bites that curious children tried, the crispy bacon exterior making them willing to taste the unfamiliar liver that turned out mild. Aunties would cut chicken livers into bite-sized pieces, marinate them briefly in soy sauce and ginger, then wrap them with water chestnut slices in bacon before securing everything with toothpicks. The bundles were arranged on baking sheets and roasted until the bacon crisped and rendered. the fat keeping the liver moist while adding smoky saltiness that transformed the organ meat into something special. As they cooked, the soy sauce caramelized slightly, creating a sweet savory glaze that coated the bacon. In Black households during the 1970s, rumaki represented culinary adventurousness, recipes borrowed from magazines that brought international flavors to holiday tables. Children who were brave enough to try them discovered that bacon really did make everything better.
Which forgotten fried soul food would you revive in your kitchen? Drop it in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more forgotten flavors from African American culinary history